to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. We are delighted to have our next guest in the studio, Adam Irving. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, Adam is the director, producer, and director of photographer for Off the Rails, which is a remarkable documentary that has received a lot of buzz and a lot of awards. Adam, welcome to the show. And I'm just going to ask you directly, tell us what this film is about.
It's about a man named Darius McCullum who is on the autism spectrum, and he has spent most of his life in maximum security prison for impersonating New York City transit workers and driving their vehicles as an imposter. And he's never hurt anyone, and he's never damaged any property, but this overwhelming love of transit that he has cost him his freedom. And the criminal justice system in New York has not found a way to channel his passions into anything legal, so they just warehouse him in a prison for a few years, let him out without rehabilitating him when he's on the inside. So when he gets out, he just does it again and again and again. Yeah. 32 times he's been arrested for this.
Shocking.
Yeah.
But can we say, though, that the film is beautiful? It's beautiful. I mean, it's shot beautifully, but it's beautiful in terms of, you know, it's kind of a love letter to Darius, and we get it all unfolds beautifully, and we get frustrated. I mean, I think anybody watching it, you get frustrated, and it's a little bit like a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
Where I found myself getting really hopeful that everything was going to be okay, and then it would take a sharp turn, and we go down another rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to give anything away, right? Because we want people to see the film.
Sure.
Where can they go to see the film? Let's start there.
They can see it in theaters in New York and Los Angeles. Okay. Here in LA, it'll be playing at Laemmle Music Hall November 4th to 10th, 5 times a day. And then in New York, later in November, from the 18th to the 24th, at the Metrograph Theater, 4 times a day. That's on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And then after that, it will be on home video, DVD, iTunes, etc.
You have all this memorized. I had it right here for you. So, but
Thank you.
He knows where his film is playing.
I've done this before.
Let's get back a little bit to, and we're going to talk about some of the awards you've received in a little bit, and some very exciting developments about this in terms of Hollywood and a major star. But you told us about the synopsis of the film, and I just have to say, it's for an autism mom who has a son with a train obsession. This brought me to tears at so many times.
Yeah, it
was hard for me. It's disturbing, Adam. It's disturbing, and an example of how our system fails our individuals with ASD.
Yeah, I actually started off making this film as a lighter, quirkier kind of catch me if you can story, where you'd kind of be rooting for the criminal who's duping people and dressing up as other people, and as long as he doesn't hurt anyone, and it's all okay. And then as I got deeper into his story and started testing out early rough cuts of the film on audiences, I found that kind of got old for them pretty soon, and what they were really drawn to is the critique of the criminal justice system, the tragedy of wasted talent of a very passionate, brilliant man who has this one topic that he's so good at, and that's the very thing that keeps ruining his life. And so you end up, about a third or halfway into the film realizing, wow, this is really heavy, this is serious, this isn't just some fun, quirky train ride, but a deeper story that gets people angry.
It really does. And I want to say that, in his early childhood, he had such a loving family. I mean, the father was distant, but the mother loved this little boy with such a passion and so provided for him. And I mean, she talked about how, she did his homework, and she drove him to the best. He had the best grades, and, it looked so hopeful. And then there's a bullying incident that really drives him further into this obsession, right?
Yeah, his family was there, they were loving, and that really is one of the only sort of systems in Darius's life that didn't fail him. And one of the systems that did was the educational system. So Darius was at school one day when he was about 11 years old during one of the worst snowstorms in New York's history, and it was just him and one other student there because no one else could get to school. And this other student literally stabbed Darius in the back with a pair of scissors when he was doing a puzzle and the teacher wasn't looking. And it was very serious. He had a collapsed lung. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and he almost died. And he really was never the same after that, because when he'd come back to school, he had to sit in the back of the class because he didn't want anyone walking behind him.
Right.
He wouldn't get up to get his homework from the teacher's desk because he was afraid he would get stabbed again. And so he started, making excuses to get out of class, and then he completely just started cutting school and, of course, hanging out in the subway system. Because he not only loved the trains, but he found sanctuary in the tunnels and
in the employees
Yeah.
of the system who thought this little boy was remarkable. This young man was remarkable.
Although exploited him.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, it worked both ways
Yeah.
because
Yes,
he found comfort in these adults who valued him as a person, who
Right.
were no threat to him physically,
Right.
and who taught him about the trains to literally drive them. And that, of course, is what ended up turning things around, because they started asking him to drive their shifts and clean the locker room and sweep the token booth and not paying him for it.
Right.
And, when he got caught driving a bus at,
age
15 years old,
right? First time.
he wouldn't give any of their names. So
Right.
he would go to jail and they would get paid. So it was really unfair that they used him.
Well, and again and again and again, we see the system fail him. There's a moment where somebody finally speaks the words about, wouldn't it have been great, wouldn't it still be great if they gave him a job? Because he is showing up doing better work than the people that they're actually paying. And the people in my household, when that was said, everybody went, yes! Like there was a roar that went up, like, yes! I mean, this is the idea. And then you quickly hear all the reasons why. And I get it. I get that there are always legal issues, but it doesn't make sense what they're doing. They're putting everybody at risk by not giving him a job. I'm again and again and again, you see ways that this could have been saved. Mm-hmm. And yet they just keep doing things the way that they've been taught because of the legal system. Well, we must see it this way, and nobody can see past that.
Yeah.
He's brilliant, and he actually, I think I don't want to give things away, but one of the most disappointing parts of the story for me was when an event happens where there's a real emergency, and he steps up and becomes the reasonable, rational person taking care of people, to the point where he's even willing to give himself up in the moment. And give up the fact that he, is masquerading as somebody so that no one gets hurt. And he gets one of the biggest punishments for that, and they pin something on him that wasn't his responsibility. I was dying, he's so articulate. He sits at the table and says, dust the fingerprints on this button and you will see that I never touched it. And that was the one thing in the film that wasn't answered. Did they ever dust that? You don't tell us.
I'm not sure, but I did speak with the assistant DA on the case. He's briefly in the film.
Yeah.
And it was ultimately up to a grand jury, and they felt, given the evidence, given his past record, and given the fact that no one else could have caused this train to trip, it seemed like the most logical explanation is Darius caused an emergency so that he could rescue passengers and be the hero and get them to safety, when he in fact had caused the danger. And Darius to this day denies it, and he is so open about bragging about all his other impersonations. So it's odd that if he actually did do this, that he wouldn't just own up to it. So it's one of those things that no one will ever know. And it's a shame that he served a lot of time for it without really
half his
any
life
proof.
He's been in prison.
Yeah.
And he's there now.
Yeah, he's there now.
And you said you talked to him on the way in the parking lot.
Yeah, he calls me every week, if not more. Sometimes it can be a little much.
I've heard this before about this phenomenon of the filmmaker getting very close with the person, of course, like Truman Capote was, very close with the person in jail. I mean, I'm sure this can lead to sort of a dependent relationship, and I'm sure that you've learned a lot from this relationship about people on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, I did learn a lot. And one of the things I learned is that Darius is not kind of the typical Asperger's type. He makes pretty good eye contact. His sense of humor feels very sophisticated. And there's almost like this charm to him that is not typical of someone who you think of as more just kind of numbers, data, no emotion. and it, revealed to me that there's just a lot of gray area. Not everyone is the same.
You've met one person with ASD. You've met one person with ASD.
Yeah, exactly.
So some exciting stuff coming up, but I do want to ask you this question. Answer it as best you can. What can be done about this situation?
Yeah.
Darius's individual situation, and then what this presents at large. That's a big question. But
yeah.
As the filmmaker, and putting all of these things out there, all of these problems, challenges, broken system, what do you think can be done, Adam?
Not a lot, unfortunately, on an individual level of, let's say, one of your viewers saying, I'm going to watch this movie, and then they see it and they say, what an injustice here, I want to do something. I mean, maybe I'm just jaded, but I feel it's very difficult for an individual working up against a huge system and a huge country with so many, corporate interests and taxpayers' interests to just make a phone call and say, oh, okay, we'll just pass this legislation and we'll set Darius free, give him the therapy he needs, we'll give him a job, and then he'll be a productive member of society, problem solved. It's just not that simple. I think it'll take years and years and years of lobbying and kind of using Darius as an example of the broken system so that other Dariuses can be helped. I think the fundamental problem here is that the criminal justice system puts people in boxes of guilty or innocent, crime, then punishment, and doesn't look at what to do when someone is incarcerated so that when they get out, they won't go back again.
Right.
And they don't have the money, the time, or the resources to do that because the prisons just keep getting more and more backed up. And someone like Darius, who knows what he's doing is wrong, but can't really help himself and has never hurt anyone or damaged any property, I don't think should just be sentenced to maximum security prison for years at a time. It's not helping anyone. So I would say, contact his lawyer, Sally Butler, and, ask her how you can help. And, write a letter to the legislators in the state of New York. And other than that, I would just say get as many people as you can to see Off the Rails so that eventually maybe the judge on Darius's case will see the film or the prosecutor and say, maybe they're not going to want to look like the bad guy after seeing that movie because they'll realize that they're the problem.
Well, there's
when I asked you how things can change, you are part of that change, Adam, by making this film. And it reminds me of a time many, many years ago when I was working in television, and a guy who worked with me said, my wife is going to be the subject of a movie, and she is going to be played by Julia Roberts. And I said, do you know how much your life is about to change? And that guy was married to a woman named Erin Brockovich.
Yes.
And that movie changed a lot. And I think your film is going to change a lot. And there's some exciting news. Tell us about that.
Well,
involving Julia Roberts.
Yes, 16 years ago, she won the Academy Award for her performance playing Erin Brockovich. And there is going to be a Hollywood movie about Darius's life story, tentatively titled Train Man, that's set to come out next year, and Julia Roberts is slated to play Darius's lawyer. So it's going to be sort of a similar feisty legal defender kind of role for Julia Roberts.
For her.
And that film, to be honest, is going to be way bigger than mine. It's got millions of dollars behind it.
You started it?
Yes, I was the first. And I hope that the combination of Off the Rails and this Julia Roberts film will bring national attention to Darius's case and to other issues at play here. How do we deal with people on the spectrum that have really strong, passions or fixations, and how can they channel that into a productive career? Because a lot of these folks are really perfect for certain jobs, and they're not being recognized because their social skills might be, problematic for some people who are hiring.
Adam, I just want to say you've won so many awards. You won Best Documentary at Woods Hole Film Festival, Best Documentary at DocuTah Film Festival. The list goes on and on and on. There's even talk of Oscar nomination in the documentary category, which we hope to see happen.
Yes.
But it's really because of storytellers like you And we want to commend you for that. Shannon and I are really, we are in awe of this film.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to watch the trailer, but we're going to do that as we say goodbye to you, because when we come back, we have another special guest. But thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
For being here, and thank you so much for picking this subject to make your film about, because it's really important.
Good luck to you, Adam.
Thank you so
Thanks so much.
So let's take a look at the trailer for Off the Rails.
My name is Darius McCullum. Over the years, I have operated trains in the New York City subway system, Metro North, New Jersey Transit, and yet I have never been an employee of any of these agencies.
Well, a Manhattan man is getting a free ride to prison.
And McCollum, said to have an encyclopedic knowledge of all things transit-related.
All of his crimes were victimless. He would safely make all of the stops, make the announcements.
He says, I'm volunteering my time, as if he's a high schooler getting community service hours.
Now, he's been picked up 20 times for the same thing.
McCollum claims to have commandeered more than 100 buses for joyrides over the past 30 years.
McCollum has such a lengthy rap sheet of transit-related crimes, he has his own Wikipedia page.
Because I have Asperger's syndrome, I have trouble making friends. I didn't want to be bullied. I didn't want to be picked on. I didn't want to have to be beaten up.
When he was young, when he was assaulted, he lost that sense of value as to who he is. Wearing a uniform creates a sense of value for Darius.
It was like I was married to the MTA.
He can't help it.
My son, he doesn't belong there because he doesn't hurt anybody.
While he was in jail, he never got any therapy.
There's a possibility that I can definitely die in jail.
He has been stuck in this revolving door for his whole entire life.
He's an individual that corrections doesn't know how to handle, doesn't want to handle, and doesn't have the money or the support to figure it out.